Right. Good morning. Welcome to the Early Learning Council meeting for June 27th, 2019. Thank you, council members, for being here and getting through traffic and making this a priority in your day. Several council members are traveling and out of state and unable to be here, which is unfortunate, but we're excited that we can have this council meeting, and we're very excited to have our special guest, Barry Leslie, here from the governor's office. And Barry will be an integral part of this meeting. So thank you.
Oh, happy to be here.
Making time to be here. Let's start. Alyssa, if you would please call the roll.
Yes, Sue Miller.
Here.
Patrick Allen is excused. Martha Brooks is excused. Donalda Dodson.
Present.
Colt Gill is excused. Holly Marr, did you join us by phone? Okay. Barabors Paxaresh is excused. Eva Ripito.
I'm here.
Shauna Rodriguez. Present. Donna Schnitker, do we still have you on the phone?
She's muted.
I'll come back to you, Donna. Terry Tallhofer.
Here.
Khalid Thorne-Ladd is excused. Bobby Weber.
Here.
Miriam Calderon.
Here.
Kate Wilcox is excused. Liesl Wendt. Candace Pelt is excused. And Chelsea Bunch.
Here.
And then Donna, can you hear us? Oh, I see you texted me. Let's see. I'll keep trying. She says she can't. Doesn't sound like she can hear us again. So I'll try dialing in.
Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? This is the time for public testimony. And I don't believe I see anybody, so we will assume the answer to that is no. All right, we're going to start with a legislative
Welcome to Zoom.
update.
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
We're trying to get Donna Schnitker on the phone, probably from Burns, I'm guessing. So let's.
Enter your participant. You are in the meeting now. There are 2 participants in the meeting.
Hi, Donna. Can you hear us now? We'll check on her.
I can.
Yay, thank you.
Okay, welcome, Donna. Thanks for being on the phone.
Thank you. Yeah.
And is there a second person, or is that you, Alyssa?
Should just be me.
Okay.
Yeah, just me.
All right. Let's get started then with a legislative update. And both Miriam and Barry are going to cover this. My understanding is that Lindsay Capps will not be able to join us.
We kept him at home today, along with many other people who usually work at the Capitol. So,
Understand why. Yeah. Okay, so Miriam and.
Sure, I can start really briefly with an update on the sort of bills that the Early Learning Division has been tracking that are sort of most pertinent to our work. So first, I think we shared via email, but the governor signed HB 2262, a bill that, among many other components, have addressed the council sort of composition. So that is exciting. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of Raise Up Oregon implementation. So I will, but I just wanted to highlight that very exciting news. The Early Learning Division and ODE has a budget that is still pending. The last action was it passing sort of full Ways and Means. The 2 bills also that have been priority bills for us, HB 2024 and HB 2025. So as a reminder, HB 2024 was codifying the Baby Promise program and the pilot. And 2025, which is our preschool alignment legislation, both are awaiting action on the Senate floor. So that is our very brief awaiting action. And so that is kind of where we are in sort of a bit of a holding pattern with those bills. We did also, Kate Wilcox could be here with us today. So she very kindly put an update together on SB 526, which is the Universal Family Connects bill, which I know is really important to the council and our work. So the good news is the bill passed the Senate and the House and is on its way to the governor awaiting signature. The bill is the first in the country to put into statute universally offered home visiting programs for all newborns. So that is really exciting. I think as a reminder, it will require commercial plans to provide this benefit for all members and gives OHA the authority to design, implement, and sustain the program. We know that there has been a letter of intent process that has already gone out, and we had 8 communities that were interested in entering a planning process to be sort of early adopters. And we have so I want to list who those 8 communities are: Clatsop County Public Health, Lane County Public Health, Washington County Public Health, Early Learning Hub of Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln Counties, Four Rivers Early Learning Hub, Eastern Oregon Early Learning Hub, Early Learning Hub of Central Oregon, and Marion and Polk Early Learning Hub. And there's going to be a kickoff meeting on July 15th. And again, the idea here is that over the next 6 years, so 3 biennials, cohorts of communities will begin offering the universal home visiting services with the goal of having the program be implemented statewide by 2025.
That actually covers a large amount of the state.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
Which early learning hubs? I got Lynn, Lincoln, and then.
Sure. So Four Rivers, Eastern Oregon, Central Oregon, and Marion Polk. Very exciting. So Barry will let us know when the governor signs, or Kate or Pat will.
Yeah.
And we thought, before we turn it over to Barry, I thought, Chelsea, if you could talk about HB 2032?
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned this before. So out of the work of the summer work groups last summer, DHS and Housing and Community Services got together to kind of talk about this policy option package, which essentially has become HB 2032. And it leverages a program that we currently manage in partnership with DHS, the Housing Stabilization Program, which offers like a 4-month rental subsidy along with case management. And it's for families who are accessing TANF services right now. What this essentially does is to extend that 4-month period of time to, I think it's 18 months. It's because we know that 4 months is not enough time in this current housing market for people to find stable housing, particularly if you're working. It's hard to be out and about and putting in applications and things like that. So this increases the length of subsidy. And it also provides, we've been talking about how we can provide housing navigation services. So how do we have somebody come alongside the family and actually help them look for housing while they're trying to navigate all the other things that they've got going on? I'm not sure of how the funding works. That I always get so confused by that. We are like literally in the process of developing what this pilot will look like. It will be a competitive pilot, and I think, and I can verify and confirm via email, but I think we're looking at 3 communities, but I could be wrong about that. And the idea is that we'd like to see local leadership teams come together and kind of figure out how that pilot will work within that community. We want to leverage the relationship that we have with community action agencies in the state, oftentimes because community action agencies and DHS self-sufficiency are oftentimes serving the same families. And this is really specific for families who are literally experiencing homelessness. We're not necessarily saying that it's families with kids 0 to 5 because our scope has got to be a little bit broader than that, but we assume that there will be plenty of families who have young children who will be accessing this housing pilot. So we're in the process of figuring out what it's going to look like. And I'll be happy to keep you posted as we move through it. So we're really excited. about it. I think it might be sitting where everything else is sitting currently. So we're kind of like, which in some ways is kind of good for us because it gives us a little bit more time to do some planning.
Yeah, it got voted on the House this week. Right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yep.
So.
Awaiting action in the Senate.
All right. Boy, Chelsea, that is very exciting. That is great news for
And
our families.
I think one other thing I would say, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, and I think this is one of the places where we see our kind of places taking a role within the Raise Up Oregon implementation plan. And I think no matter, we're definitely hopeful about it moving forward, but no matter what happens, I think this is the opportunity to be linking early learning, particularly the early learning hubs, with local community action agencies across the state. And so as we kind of roll this out and think about the planning piece of it, we're going to want to be really deeply connected with the early learning division. So make sure that that it's reflective of the needs of the plan and the agencies.
Chelsea, that's super exciting. I think it would be great to stay in touch about that
Yeah.
with the potential for expansion
Yeah.
of early Head Start and Head Start through the Student Success Act,
Yeah.
and the fact that those families would all be categorically eligible for early Head Start and Head Start. As you sort of hone in on who those communities are, I think we could try to facilitate those connections potentially and add that to the effort.
Okay, that's great.
Great. I love it. The partnering and collaboration among agencies is just.
Right in line.
Real time.
Yes.
It's our I word. Super. All right, thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Any other updates before we turn to the governor's office? Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
So much good news.
So much good news. You are on, Barry.
Well, thank you all so much for inviting me to join you today. It feels really good to be in this room right now this week. To be with a group of people who are all rowing in the same direction and excited about the same things just feels good. So I was actually just really happy to be here. And as you would probably suspect, the governor would actually really like to be here too, not only to provide the update, but also just to thank all of you for your tremendous work. And you can imagine where she is today. So, as Sue mentioned, Lindsay was going to join me today, and we just recommended that lots of folks work from Portland today in order to avoid the congestion that's hitting the streets. But I don't really have a huge legislative update because I think Miriam and Chelsea did a great job covering it. I think you all know that. If things hold the way they have been in terms of the votes we've had so far, we just had an extraordinary session. And it is such an exciting time. As I told people when we first started session, I don't remember a time when you had the business community, the education community, the stakeholder community, state government, leadership in the form of the council and the governor, all really excited and rowing in the same direction. And so that's what it takes to move $400 million. And it just was an extraordinary session. And not just from that perspective, I think from the things that the Early Learning Division accomplished specifically too. So we're just incredibly excited about the future. So I think maybe just a couple of interesting things to think about for the future. The really hard work that all of you folks did in terms of Raise Up Oregon and building the strategic plan obviously will continue and be the framework for a lot of the work that the rest of us do in terms of helping the agencies stay together and coordinated. I know that Miriam and Alyssa and Sue are on me all the time about making sure the Governor's Children's Cabinet is really focused on how to help implement Raise Up Oregon. And so that's going to be a large focus of the governor's time and attention for the next 18 months is how to take the work that you've all done and use the cabinet structure to keep all of the agencies that are involved in implementing that aligned to bring that work forward. And so that's exciting. And you may or may not have seen that we also did receive the investment for the children's database, which will start to track these investments that we made, both as part of the early learning investments and as part of the Governor's Children's Agenda, to determine how and what kind of impact these investments are having and where we should be targeting dollars in the future if they're not necessarily working in the areas that we have. So I think it's an exciting time from an implementation standpoint, and it's an exciting time from a measurement standpoint, because those will be the ways that we can demonstrate to people that this was the right decision to trust us with these dollars. So I'm excited to show people that we can be really successful at implementing large projects.
Which budget bill was the database in?
HECS, the Higher Education Commission's budget, and it's an allotment to OHSU, so that's exciting. So other than that, I'm here to celebrate with all of you, and thank you for your hard work, and look forward to lots more fun conversations ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Sue.
Yes, thank you. And I think we've talked about this at other council meetings, but we know, Barry, that it was really the governor's leadership and her willingness to say this is one of my stakes in the ground that really helped move the early learning agenda forward. So
Thank you, Sue.
please convey our appreciation
She
for that.
wouldn't want to accept that credit, but I will accept it because I know that it is true, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
wouldn't happen without her. So, any other comments? Many of you have spent time in the Capitol in the last several months. So any other comments anyone on the council wants to offer?
Miriam's looking at me like,
I'm
yeah.
like, Eva, wait
Okay, well, we'll just celebrate with where we've ended up.
Well, I think it's just nice that we're acknowledging the children and the families and the value of children and families to us as a state. And if we do things now, then we'll have good results down the road, not waiting for the wheels to run off or fall off the bus, but to keep them on before they do that. So I think it's a big investment in children and families.
Yes, yes, it is. Got it. Thanks, Donalda, for that comment. All right, so Alyssa, do you, Miriam and I want to take us through an exciting history of this body?
Walk down memory lane.
We have a couple of founding members of the
Yes.
council sitting here.
Yes. So I
Who
just
can fill in any blanks
Please.
going back to 2011.
Yes, I did consult Seth Allen about some of the early years before I started to make sure I didn't miss anything major. So
And
I
I
just
like
want-
how you found the pictures too.
I told Terry. So I did find a slide deck called Council Babies because there was one year where we had 3 council members and then Seth, our council staff, all had babies within 2-3 months of each other. So we found a slide deck of all those babies
Yeah,
and
we were
everybody.
all October, November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So lots happened. So I just wanted to run through real quick. So 2011, and Terry and Bobby, you can speak to some of this work too. But I thought it was actually really exciting as I was kind of looking through some of the old reports the council adopted and the recommendations. There's a lot of alignment with Raise Up Oregon and a lot of similar ideas. And I think what's exciting is that now we've got cross-sector buy-in on those ideas, and so. It's growing and it's bigger, and so I just wanted to call that out as I looked through the straw person proposal that we used to talk about a lot, and there's some big dreams in there, an integrated data system tracking outcomes, but I think a lot of that work, early identification and screening processes are universal. I mean, there's a lot of work that's happening or we're definitely making progress on. So I just wanted to capture that.
Will you go back
Yeah.
to 11 for a minute? Just because Bobby and Terry were
In it.
there.
I was
That-
part of this
Yeah, the
design
design team.
team, and then I wasn't on the council, but then
Yep.
came in 2012
Yeah.
on the council. Yeah.
Yes, I was on that design team too.
Yep.
Yeah, it was huge. We would meet at Willamette like on a Monday evening. Is that right? Yeah.
It was, yes, lots of straw people to look at.
Yeah.
But do any of you want to add anything to this or highlight any of these bullets that Alyssa has pulled out?
Well, I don't know that it doesn't fit under any bullet, but something that was certainly an important component was the makeup of the council was heavily business. And it drove, it was a different kind of energy. It was an impatience with, I remember a lot of the tasks that we had to do, the business members of the council assumed they could be done within months. And we were all, those of us who had more experience in early learning system were, just watching. It was a good tension. It was a very good tension to have. And you really can't understand the first 2 years, I don't think, without looking at the makeup. So I would add a bullet
Yeah.
of the makeup of the council. And because the dynamic was very much shaped by who was on there.
Yeah. Interesting observation. I know one of those businessmen very well. And he is still wondering why on earth things take so long.
Well, I would say that it was part of who wasn't there and hasn't been there until the governor's cabinet. One of my frustrations was when we were defining the 30%, and it was any child who touched DHS, but yet DHS wasn't at the table. And so from a local perspective, I knew as a health department director, I couldn't make DHS do anything. So I wondered how this new early learning council was supposed to drive these other agencies. And I think there was a lot of spinning our wheels, and I think that's part of the reason we've made so much progress this year, in the last couple of years, is because of the vision to say to those agency heads, no, you have a stake in this, you need to be at the table, even though it's not necessarily our table, and it's a different one, but they're having to be accountable for the children. And I think it's really moved in a very, very different way.
Yeah, great observations about the membership of the council.
And the work of the council really happened with the council members. There was
There was
us,
no ELD.
right. There was us and Duke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Which added
Wow.
complexity because, we mentioned this before, but it should be recorded. When you have a council without a state agency and staff, then the council does work that's inappropriate for a council to do. And, but there wasn't anybody else to do it. And then there was the transition as we got staff, the council figuring out
How to let go of that.
what was council, because the immediacy of the tasks in front of us drove our agenda. And then as staff came on, it was a challenge to identify what was council policy work versus what staff should be doing. And I think we're through that. But it took us several years. That was a rocky, you wouldn't, anyway, but we did it.
Yeah. I just want to highlight something that Alyssa said, just looking at the bullets, and when I was looking at this yesterday, just how much of alignment there is, and accomplishments. Thinking about the focus on developmental screening and where we are, and even how that's evolved in the new strategic plan and the work. The systematic connection to other systems, human services, healthcare, and education. I think, Terry, what you were just saying. Obviously, the integrated data system, we'll keep working on that, but we got a good update today from Barry. So just really amazing to see how some of these, how the work has moved forward and how it's evolved, and how I think it was reaffirming to me that we're kind of on the right track with our next strategic plan.
What's not showing up there
Yeah.
is we wouldn't have a kindergarten readiness
Yes.
assessment, I don't think, without the leadership of a couple of key business people who were able to change minds. And their impatience was helpful in the sense that none of us would have rolled out the kindergarten readiness assessment in the time frame we actually rolled it out. But because they brought a different perspective, they kept saying, why not? Why not? We'll do it. Anyway, but I'd like to capture, that's a very important piece for Oregon. My goodness, how much we rely on having that information. And we were nip and tuck in getting that
And we worked hard to sell it.
Oh yeah, because even after the first release, the first bit of data came out about the KRA, there was a lot of community pushback and questioning about how it was being used and how it wasn't perpetuating a lot of the systemic things that we were, trying to overcome instead of like figuring out where kids were, So it was, yeah, as Terry said, yeah, we had to sell it. But I think it was also that even though we were using some sort of assessment to make sure we had an understanding of where kids are when they're entering school, that we had to find that balance between understanding people's concerns about how it could be used instead of the intention of the usage. Not a shaming, but just where are you? So we can help you.
But I think of how much we rely in our planning on what we've learned from those scores and the amount of research that's been done that has helped us identify which children are coming to school with the most challenges and how they're located geographically and what the kind of patterns that, all that information is only available to us because we implemented a KRA. So I think somehow it needs to show up because I consider it one of our major accomplishments as a council.
I think there was a great number that was a big challenge. I remember that just even in the design team straw proposal coming out, people had very strong feelings about how to how are we choosing which children to focus on, and like the Venn diagram of services and cultural need, and I just remember people had a lot of questions, and I think we were better for it because they did ask them, and they did challenge us enough to be able to think through it in a better way and get us to getting more people to the table and working through how we actually address needs.
And this was prior to Oregon having full-day kindergarten, right?
It was in the works. I think some schools had full-day kindergarten, but not all.
But not all, yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
statewide. What year did we get? That wasn't that long ago that we got full-day kindergarten. It's during
2013?
15?
13.
13.
Who was it? There were some pilot schools before that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
districts, or they would offer, what was really common was districts would offer full day for parents who paid.
Oh, that's right.
The-
I do remember that
The
discussion.
extra-
I think a lot of districts
Part.
probably use Title I too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of Title I full-day kindergarten.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, we had this discussion about it when we were at Youth Villages. Our meeting at Youth Villages. One
The
time.
retreat.
I don't know why I remember the setting where we had this discussion. I remember things visually.
Right. Alyssa, were you here in 2011?
Not yet. At Willamette.
Right.
Yes.
You were near.
I was near. I was probably
nearby.
Yeah, I was probably on campus while you guys were meeting. So.
And showed up shortly thereafter.
Yes. Yep.
All right, well, let's go to 2012, but know that people can insert things
Yeah.
as we go through.
This is great. Yes, and I'll let folks jump in. These were sort of the high points I pulled out, as Bobby mentioned, actually getting staff assigned, we were still called the Early Learning Council as staff, but this was the sunsetting of the commissions, bringing on our first Early Learning System Director. Krista Rude convened the Community-Based Coordinators Work Group as hubs were just an idea. Kindergarten Readiness Assessment Work Group recommendations. This was a big year, and then we capped it off with the Race the Top grant that paid for so many of our positions to allow the division to really grow. If there's any reflections there.
How many positions were in that?
In Race the Top, oh gosh, there were 5 people when I started, and when we got Race the Top, I think we ended up hiring at least 10 staff. Yeah, if not more. Yeah.
I remember it was huge, and I think 4 of those or 5 were assigned to the hubs and
Yep.
regions, so they were really out there helping grow that community base.
Yeah, we hired our regional staff a couple years later. We had 4. Yeah, it was huge for getting
And we
it.
got QRS.
Yes, that's QRIS.
It was a requirement of receiving the money, but it allowed us to build Spark.
That's right.
Yep.
Also, something that had to be sold.
Yes.
Yes, still has to be.
Still. Yeah, it still has to be sold. There's still, there's still a lot of people that are like, I'm not sure that this is worth my time and increased investment because the payoff isn't. Right.
Well, and I would just say that our screening tools work group, led by Dana Harganani, came to the decision of using ASQ, which then the CCOs adopted, and they get paid for it, but early learning providers don't. So that's still a rub for me. But we did the work, and then the CCOs adopted it as the screening tool. So, and there was a lot of pushback about having to use a tool, about medical providers having to use a tool. And there are still medical providers that, they're not using the tool to fidelity. And that's pretty clear when you see how they're doing that. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
To that point, that there are the early learning providers, especially those who have adopted the QRS, and they, having screening as part of that curriculum, especially on the 4 and 5 level. They'll do this and they'll mention things to parents, or just even if they don't do ASQ, and just from years of experience observing a kid, they'll mention something to a parent, and the parent will say, well, I don't, my doctor hasn't said anything about it, or, I don't, so I think there is still there's still a gap there between how do you get what somebody who's with a child on a daily basis, or more frequent basis anyway, than a physician who might just be implementing a screening tool, how do you braid that together to, find out what's going on with a kid and what they need?
I think that's where the hubs have done a lot of work to help bridge that too.
Yeah.
I was working for the administration on Race to the Top, so I was
Thanks.
very mindful of where Oregon was without trying to be too obvious about it. The rankings. Yay,
We
so happy,
appreciated
I
going
remember
down
that.
2 or 3 slots.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We fit in.
Yeah,
Thanks, Miriam.
so happy.
All right, let's see what 13 looked like. Aha.
13, it was, I think, largely consumed with the hubs. We had the award team, we had the RFP, we were doing road shows across the state. So no, the list isn't long, but that was a really big year of work, and it was exciting. I remember the last meeting we had was at up in Portland, and we were able to actually give some certificates to the first recognized QRIS providers. And that's when we announced the first round of early learning hubs.
I also remember the setting for that.
Yes. Yep. And then Kids Harbor signed. I think it was the hub bill into legislation, into law for us. So that was a big meeting.
And you joined in 2012,
I
right?
joined in 2012. Yes.
We have to add that to we have to add that bullet.
Thank you.
You could add that.
Yeah.
There could be a bullet.
Alyssa starts.
Alyssa
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And Terry, you were both on the award committee, weren't you, for hubs? Yeah.
Yes. Something, I don't know where it would fall in the history, but, we had the Commission on Children and Families and the Commission on Child Care. So we didn't start from zero.
Right.
And that's good and bad, because, I don't know, I personally feel like we never did a good enough analysis of what went wrong with the Commission on Children and Families system. And it still kind of haunts. And
Yeah, because there are
what
some people that are still.
worries me
Still hanging around.
in building the hubs, that we're clear and to not be repeating and to not get into the same challenges with the legislature that the commission system did. Now, it's very different. There's no county, I mean, the county role in the commissions was really important. But anyway, I personally feel like that's a gap that should be done, which is just stakeholder analysis of what we learned from running commissions on children and families. Are any of those relevant to what we're doing with the hubs? I just want to be sure that we don't build up this wonderful system and lose it. I guess that's my, so I don't see this as an academic activity. I see this as, especially as a learning activity, especially the relationship between the legislature and the hubs. My fear all along has been they're the easiest thing to cut because they do convening, facilitating, planning, and the system absolutely needs that role. And yet I think it's the hardest to convince the legislature that why it's needed. And so when dollars are short, it's very easy to say, take those dollars. No
It's
child
not
is
services.
going to lose their services, so therefore take those dollars. So I think the analysis would be an investment in protecting the hub system that we're building.
It's very interesting, Bobby. I just spoke last week with a hub director who was also involved in the commission system.
Oh.
And she had exactly the same comment, that we've never really done that deep dive with the people around the table who really would have insights on that as far as what didn't work and what worked, and how could that inform where we're going with the hubs. So
Yeah, I think the
we
what
should do
worked
that.
has gotten swept away in a big way. We hear, oh, the commission system didn't work. But for rural communities, we took a big hit when the commission system went away. I'll just talk about the 5 counties I work in. We now have 1.5 staff where there used to be 10. I mean, there had to be 2 FTE. There were 10 people working on this in those 5 counties, and now there's 1.5.
Josephine County also, I remember, because, from my AFSCME hat, I remember getting a call from staff rep going, "What are you doing? Like, why are you advocating for this?" And I was like, you didn't tell me who was working there,
And those 10 people knew each other and worked across county lines because that's the way we work. But there were 10 FTE doing that work, and now there's 1.5. Who drives miles and miles and miles every month to get to those communities. So I think we've put investment in the system, but we haven't put as much investment on the ground as needs to happen, and there needs to be some change for
I
that.
think Eastern has the same issue.
Yeah.
I think that was part of something that frustrated me at the beginning of the council was like the continued mantra of do more with less. And I was like, there is no more to do with any less. It's now time to rebuild it. And I think that we have been doing that rebuilding, but there's so much ground to be made up, I guess.
Yeah, the investment has been at the state level. So the division was created and the division staff continue to grow. Locally, they're continuing to work with very, very few resources.
Hey, Lisa.
Hello,
welcome.
apologize for being late. I think having a metro perspective, I think one of the things I've observed is if we want to do collective impact, that sounds like doing more with less. But doing collective impact work actually requires different kinds of investments of staff, whether that be data, communication, truly that not just convening, but nudging people towards data-driven goals. And I feel like we say collective impact as though you bring people together and more will happen, and it doesn't work that way. And in metro areas, I think you end up having a little bit of an opposite problem where the table gets so big and you have so many voices, and who's going to choose? We're going to focus on these 3 things, and we're going to measure our progress, and then we're going to go to the next 3 things. And so that structure around who gets to make it okay to say we're going to focus and prioritize and truly invest in those collective impact skill sets and capacity, which is different, I think, than the commission skill set and capacity. Some of it's similar, but some of it's some additional needs.
Oh, I think they're very different, and that's what I want to capture. I mean, what the point I want
Right.
is to capture, and especially communication of why that function is needed in a way that is persuasive, it's clear. It can sound like jargon.
Yeah.
It's, so I think, anyway, if we're going to keep the hubs and through, future sessions, I see it as a high priority.
Right. Well, I think it's probably the distinction between sort of managing programs and administering programs and doing some of that kind of collective impact work. So it's part of, I think, telling the story about the change. So it is different work. Obviously, it's also more focused on young children, right, where the commission's span was much broader. And I think that's one of the stories that's really important to tell about the impact of the hubs to date, is how much they have actually driven a focus on early childhood in this population, children and families in their regions and communities. But that's like, I think as we think about resources and what is that capacity that's needed for hubs, I think that's exactly honoring and recognizing the different work and skill sets that are required to sort of drive systems work, is data, is some of that, the outreach and communication, the facilitation. And then I think we recognize too that the flexible dollars that they have are really important when you're doing systems work for incubation and those sorts of pieces. And so we have to start to tell the story differently and distinguishing between managing funds and programs.
Right, yes.
Okay, great conversation. Thank you, everybody. 2014.
There we go. And actually, I think these babies were actually born end of 2013. Slide deck in 2014. But this is when we
We were
had.
on leave in 2014.
Yes, exactly. This is why we had the photos.
Look, you begin adopting rules.
Yep. This is where it
Rule
starts.
making.
Yes, this is when we get our second director, Megan, and we adopt the first strategic plan of the Early Learning Council, get the rest of the hubs up and running, and tackle rules for the first time. Yes. Hub rules, there were KPI rules, the early literacy grant, a little bit of childcare, but it was a lot of those early programs you guys were helping get up and running. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Bobby doesn't want to talk about rules.
I'm feeling it's coming.
In 2015, we used to have the equity subcommittee before the equity implementation committee, and they put together that really robust subcommittee report that helped inform the creation of the equity implementation committee. This is when Megan was actually appointed as the second director. This was also when we were able to convene 2 work groups that were very parent and provider focused. And from an operational standpoint, it was exciting to work with the Department of Education to figure out ways to reimburse parents and reimburse providers for substitutes and help them kind of think through the needs of our communities. Vroom was introduced. I found the very first slide deck you guys received on Vroom. And this is when we also reorganized Healthy Families Oregon and did the new RFP for that. Which I know if Martha would hear, she would have thoughts on. Okay. I'll turn it to Sue so I don't keep talking.
Oh, you're doing a great job, Alyssa. Yes, so I was fortunate enough to join all of you in 2016, the fall of that year. Appreciate all of you helping me figure out what that new role meant, so thank you very much. David excitedly stepped forward to be our acting director. And we appreciate that, David, and the fact that you're still here. Appreciate that as well. Preschool Promise was certainly forefront. In fact, I think that was the big agenda item at my
Yes.
first meeting.
And many more.
Yes, and many
To come.
more, with lots of feelings about that, as we all know. But we've come a long way and now have legislation to really reinforce that program.
One of the things that was really exciting for me on Preschool Promise was when I was persistent on having family childcare included in that. A lot of people expressed a great amount of doubt as to whether or not family childcare was an appropriate setting for that kind of program. And Megan said, no, let's do it, and had me at the table for the ad hoc, chair the ad hoc committee for discussing creating the rule recommendation. So now we have, Dana Hepper just sent me an email to connect me with another state. I can't remember which state it was. I want to say New Hampshire or somewhere, but now they're looking at how did you include family childcare? What are you doing? And I was like, I told you guys.
20% of the slots.
Yeah.
Family childcare.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of lessons learned. I'm not going to say it's perfect. We did it. There's still, we still have lessons to learn from that and how to make it, make it work. But I'm really grateful that, the body and Megan and, everybody else that took that leap of faith did that, because I think we carved the way for others.
It's working. Yeah, that's exciting, 20%. I didn't realize that. And once again, if Martha were here, we would hear a lot about this budget note.
Yes, we would.
I've heard a lot about the budget note, and I started a year later.
Right. It was Preschool Promise and the budget note.
Yeah.
Were very important in 2016.
Whole subcommittee on
Yes.
this budget note, yeah.
And then we adopted our guiding principles, which really have informed our policy decisions. For a while, we're actually having them in every packet. We kind of dropped off of that during the development of our plan, but
Dana texted me, it's Maryland.
Just watch it.
Sorry.
and then Miriam shows up, decides she's ready to get back to Oregon.
Number 4.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yes, fourth time is a charm. And then our CCR&R redesign obviously was a big lift. And I think we're going to see continued changes in the whole CCR&R role and our connection to it and the hub's connections to those programs. So, and then the monitoring report for the hubs, I remember reading through all 16 of those. And you'll remember there was lots of information. I love the matrices we got about, the different sectors and who was at the table and which hubs were having a hard time getting partners to the table. But I think that probably was sort of a foundational piece as we then ended up going into our strategic plan development, and is certainly going to be foundational for the council's implementation of that plan. So,
What was striking is which organizations were pretty consistently across the state not participating. That was very insightful, because then it's not community dynamics, it's something systemic going on. Yeah, we learned a lot of credit to the team that did that evaluation. I mean, it had real meaning, and were able to see policy directions from the findings. It was very effective evaluation of a very complicated system.
Yes, very complex. And
Our guiding principles, they went through several iterations, but to me, the, always will be that we make decisions on what's good for children and families. And that seems so obvious, but in a lot of policy discussions, it's the providers who are the primary, the primary audience of attention or making decisions in deference to their needs. And I'm not anti-provider, but that's a slippery slope when you don't put children and parents first. And in fact, it's interesting, we're serving on the safety portal. Martha and I are, I don't know what our role is, but exactly, advisors or anyway, but serving on it. And we've got 3 parents, and we've got providers and parents, both really important audiences to participate. But the energy and the insight that parents bring to any table is just irreplaceable. So I don't know, going forward, if we could, I love some of the experiments the hubs have been successful in meaningful engagement of parents. And it's very, very, I think very important to our work is that we continue to find ways to strengthen the link between the policy work and the knowledge and experience perceptions of parents. And I'm very glad it's in our guiding principles.
yeah, thank you, Bobby. In fact, one of the parents from the Child Care Safety Portal Ad Hoc Committee called me yesterday with follow-up comments and questions about the meeting and the information. So they are very engaged. All 3 of them were. So, yep, their voices are important.
On that tension, so like even when Bobby said it, I was like, oh, like I just remember that dynamic of those conversations too, because I know just from all of the tables where I sit, whether it's early learning or other policy areas, I know that if the workforce isn't supported in how to meet the expectations of of what's being put on them, whether it is we're changing how we give supports to people with disabilities, or we're changing how we look at a certain dynamic. If that workforce isn't brought along, isn't supported in that work and given, not only training, but encouragement and honored for their time and efforts, whether it is proper pay or, just that recognition, that tension's going to remain. I mean, and sure, when you're asking somebody to change the way they're doing something for a greater good, there's still always going to be tension, but I think you have to honor what honor that place that the workforce is coming from and give them the proper supports to be able to do it. Because I remember in discussing the guiding principles that, I wanted yes, it should be for the children, but I think if you don't have a workforce that's properly compensated and trained and supported, you can't get to what's best for the children.
They certainly go together, and I think what's best for children always needs to be the focus. And we know that a really well-trained, committed workforce is a piece of the puzzle of what's going to be best for kids. So I think they align, even though there's obviously sometimes tension. But we are all in this together, I think, is the bottom line of that. And then the final bullet was the launch of the strategic planning effort, which we were all there for that in October, November of 17. And then enter Miriam in 18. Yay.
Yay. So 18, really our highlight was just the work, the tremendous effort and work of this council and the hubs and our stakeholders to put Raise Up Oregon together. I think, I've said this before, going into this, I thought, we know we really need to do really meaningful community engagement to identify the priorities, both not just related to early care and education, but for all of the sectors. We knew, and I thought, I don't know how we're going to have the resources and the manpower to be able to do that. And so it just, what we were able to accomplish, I think, in terms of the participation of our agency partners, as well as our hubs, and all of you really doing that work over a year period to truly hear for community. And was just phenomenal. I know exceeded what I thought was possible. And really kind of incredible work, particularly acknowledging, I think, Alyssa's efforts were tremendous around organizing all of that. And my colleagues at the Early Learning Division to take your feedback and sort of what we heard and then try to translate those into actual strategies. It was just really exciting. And I think going back to some of the first slide in 2011, again, really helping the council, I think, have a plan that is really, I think, grounded in that original vision of work cross-sector, supporting families. I mean, you see a lot of that in the 2011 vision, right? The family support managers in every elementary school catchment area. So that was always been an important focus of this council and the work, the healthy development of children and the well-being of families. So very exciting.
Yes. Congratulations to everybody who made that happen.
Yeah.
And then this year, another amazing year for early learning.
Yes. So with, as we've talked about, the passage of the Student Success Act, this is, as you see there, more than doubling the state investment in the programs that are administered by the Early Learning Division. I think as I reflect on the historic moment of this investment, there's a lot in here, and I think has been alluded to in the conversation we've been having and going through the history of taking what we have been doing and learning, and now with the opportunity for new investment, really thinking about what that looks like at scale, and how we have opportunities to be able to shift and align and build an early care and education system that both is grounded in what we've been learning from implementation thus far, and what we know and understand is really important to be able to scale, right? So I think that's the part that's really exciting to me. There's some new in the Student Success Act, obviously the Equity Fund and some new programs, but I think by and large, it's an opportunity to bring resources into our existing system, and really think about what we've learned across all of these years, through the hub role, investment in hubs, through implementation of Preschool Promise, administration of OPK, a number of different programs that we've administered, QRIS, Spark, and think about, how do we leverage all of that knowledge now and be able to support the kind of capacity that we need to be able to scale and deliver quality. I think that's when I think about some of the complexity of the work and the design and what we've got, what we're facing ahead as we think about implementing this. So very exciting.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
Governor.
And a good picture.
Yes, I know, amazing picture. And and it's interesting because when I started, and even before I started, I was, asking a lot, and including some of the council members, what do you think the goals and priorities are in Oregon? Where is Oregon? What do we need to accomplish? And I heard a lot of I heard this over and over again, but Oregon is, there's a lot of innovation in Oregon, which I think is absolutely true, but a lot of pilots and not a lot of scale. And I think when I think about what we have here, it's really this incredible opportunity to scale, so.
Yes, we have a long history.
Yes.
Running pilots, proving
Yeah.
with good evaluation research that they're effective, and then letting them die. It's like,
Right.
Or modifying them so much that they died.
Yes.
Right.
An interesting little side note, the handsome, adorable little boy there next to Eva is Elvisa's son.
Yeah, it was like, a lot of people were like, oh, is that your son? I was like, nope, that's Elvisa's son. That's Diego.
So, Elvisa
And
at
his
SEIU
mom's,
who works on
you could
child.
see her hair right in the corner.
Yes.
That's Kristen's hair.
Clearly captured the governor's interest.
It is about the kids.
And I really thought it was important to get Diego up there too because, Elvis has done a lot to
Absolutely,
help out behind the scenes.
definitely.
Awesome.
Can I just say something that I don't think got captured in this was the amount of community engagement that the council did by traveling throughout the state. And as the council moves forward in its new formation with representatives from each of the congressional districts, I would encourage you all to get back out there and hear from communities firsthand. I think it informed my vision greatly, and I would also ask the governor to only appoint people who commit to represent all Oregon's children and who are willing to get out there. Asking hubs and families and providers to get here is not within our equity lens, and so we need to go there. We've got the resources to do it, and I always felt like my role was to represent all of Oregon's children, not just those in the Gorge. And so I think I missed one travel. I got the flu and couldn't go to Burns. Sorry, Donna. But it gave us such valuable information to hear communities and hear families firsthand. And if we are going to put children and families first, we need to be listening to children and families, and they don't have the opportunity to come here.
I would say it changed us in ways that are hard to measure.
Yeah.
But we were different. So I don't know how much good we did to the community by coming, but they came out in great numbers and did potlucks with us. The Warm Springs potluck, I have great memories. But I was changed, and nothing we looked at ever looked the same. After I had sat at the Warm Springs potluck, they fed us delicious food. Anyway, and then and in each one was different, but each one had a pretty profound effect on how I viewed other things. So it's a hard thing to describe accurately, but I would second what Terry said, that it is really important to hear people from different parts of the state. Some things are the same, but some things are really different depending where you live.
I would say there were some very harsh proposals in the beginning. There were things like taking away services if families didn't follow plans and those sorts of things, which made me very uncomfortable, coming from people from an economic and social place that had no understanding of what families were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I think those visits changed that. You have to engage with the people that you're serving, and that's children and families, to understand their struggles, to be able to make those differences. And I will say that my one great regret, I don't think we did enough with metro families. I don't think we were inner city Portland enough. I don't, and I know what rural families struggle with. I don't know what African Americans families struggle with in inner city Portland. And I think we just can't make assumptions about, we need to get in there and hear their stories.
I would second that. I think one of the things that I heard consistently, though, in every community was from business people saying we don't have enough childcare, which, we still need to. Yeah, we still hear.
It's still true.
Yeah, we don't have enough childcare. That's one of the main reasons people would call in is that their childcare fell through, or they didn't have backup care, and then I remember when we went to Tillamook, and there was one center, and I mean, it was, I can't remember if they were working on QRIS at the time. I'm sure somebody's gonna text me and tell me. But the conversation was that I believed it was they couldn't do QRIS because they didn't have access to the amount of training that was necessary to be able to achieve it and then sustain it. So maybe, was that it? Yeah.
Probably, I mean,
Yeah.
that tends to be one of the core
Yeah,
issues.
it wasn't because they weren't interested or didn't, didn't consider themselves quality or not, like it was, they just didn't have access to it. And then there isn't the supply of family childcare providers too, to, build something like that.
All
Still a
right.
lot of work to be done.
Thank you for the history and the prompting of comments,
Yeah.
Alyssa. And thank you, everybody, for your feedback. Donna, if you are on the phone, do you have anything you would like to add to this historical perspective?
Well, it really was fun to go back and see the progression and the history of the Early Learning Council. And it's amazing to think about all the good work that has happened over just a few short years. I think we should be proud of ourselves.
All right. Thank you, Donna. We appreciate what you are doing in Eastern Oregon. Okay, let's move on then. Obviously, we've thrown the time frame listed on the agenda out the window, so I guess
This is
we're
not like you, Sue. What is going on?
I know. That's, yeah, this
It's a
is,
nostalgic council.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, that's great.
that's great. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Barry on behalf of the governor.
Thank you. Well, I get to do the fun part of thanking each of you individually, and I think presenting you with a small token. A small token. Those are beautiful. I've never gotten anything like this before. What is going on here? How many years do I have seen them? Well, so you guys will see them individually, but for those in the audience, and those are gorgeous. Wow. Those are really, really spectacular. How neat. And I am noticing that the older I get, the more I cannot read things on tiny glass that are small. So with that, I'll start with Bobby. So Bobby, this first award is for you. Thank you for your dedicated service as a member of the Early Learning Council. As a founding member of the Early Learning Council, you have kept the health, safety, and support of Oregon's young children and families at the forefront of the council and child care and education committee's work. From the development of early learning hubs to the initial alignment of child care rules, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come.
Thank you. Thank you.
I knew everything I've ever known about childcare deserts after watching Bobby West. So I can now go out to cocktail parties and I just be like, did you know? Terry.
That's what people at cocktail parties want to
That's
talk
what
about.
No, that's why nobody at cocktail parties asks me what I do for a living. So Terry, thank you for your dedicated service as a member of the Early Learning Council. As a founding member of the Early Learning Council, you have kept the health, safety, and support of Oregon's young children and families at the forefront of the council's work. From the development of early learning hubs to the alignment with the Oregon Health Policy Board, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come. So, thank you. Eva, right here.
If I had known we were going to get awards or
I
something, I would have
know.
worn my fancy skirt.
No.
It's gonna live on social media too.
I know. Now I'm just like in my,
You look fabulous. Well, thank you for your dedicated service. as a member of the Early Learning Council, also as a founding member of the council, you've kept the health, safety, and support of Oregon's young children and families at the forefront of the council's work. From the development of early learning hubs to chairing the Committee on Preschool Promise, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come. Thank you. Beautiful things. And Martha's not here. Did you want me to read it in for the record?
Sure, that
Okay.
would be great. So thank you, Barry.
So Martha, wherever you are, whenever you see this, thank you for your dedicated service to Oregon's young children and families as a member of the Early Learning Council and chair of the Best Beginnings Committee. Martha's work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come. And Donalda, right here on my right, and fellow Salemite, thank you for your dedicated service. With the development of Raise Up Oregon, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And Kali, want to thank Kali for her dedicated service as well as a member of the Early Learning Council and her contribution to developing Raise Up Oregon. Her work will also continue to have a profound impact. And Sue Miller. Oh my goodness, Sue Miller. I have to tell the joke that I always tell when I talk about Sue Miller, which is that everyone's always like, Barry, what do you want your next job to be? And I'm like, I want to be chief of staff for Sue and she's mayor of Salem. I know it's impossible because she's already been the mayor of Salem, but you want to do it again? I'm ready, Sue.
Thanks anyway.
Yeah. Well, Sue, thank you for your
Was fun.
dedicated service to Oregon's young children and families. As the Early Learning Council chair, you have kept the safety and success of children at the forefront of all early learning. With your leadership in developing Raise Up Oregon, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come. Thank you so much. I'll be waiting. So want to also thank Holly for her dedicated service on the Early Learning Council and for chairing the Measuring Success Committee. And her work will also continue to have a profound impact. And Donna Schnitker by phone. We're going to thank Donna by phone. Donna, if you can hear me, thank you too for your dedicated service to Oregon's young children and families and as a member of the Early Learning Council. With the development of Raise Up Oregon, your work will continue to have a profound impact on children and families for years to come. So.
Thank you, Donna. And I am guessing you have put more miles on your car getting to council meetings and other meetings in Salem than many of us. So thank you for all of your commuting.
You're welcome.
And we'll get the plaque to you. It's very beautiful. Thank you.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk about implementation of Raise Up Oregon, which we all have memorized, but we still have some work to do.
Okay, so real quick, before we kind of dig into the structure and the vision, little housekeeping. So House Bill 2262 doesn't go into effect until September 1st, and so you are all council members through August, and so that means we would like to invite you back on August 13th to adopt rules. Because we can't let you get away that easily. You may remember you adopted some rules last month, CCDF requirements for training and updates to Central Background Registry. And so with the shift, we didn't want to risk these rules lapsing and appreciate your consideration to return for a quick virtual meeting. So I'll send out information, but just wanted to throw that on your radar. And I'll turn to Sue to talk about the fun stuff a little bit.
And that will only be virtual?
Only virtual, yeah. Don't worry about coming out. I'll send, I think we're looking at, something similar, 11 a.m., just a quick adoption. We'll hopefully have a bit more of an update on session by then. I'm crossing my fingers, the new council administrator has been hired and you can meet them virtually as well. So I will get that information to you guys.
Okay, so thank you for putting August 13th on your calendars. And it should be a relatively short meeting, we're guessing 30 to 60 minutes.
Oh, 30 max.
30
Normal
max.
hours.
So, okay. Thanks, Alyssa.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about council roles, structure, a lot of which is driven by the bill that the governor's staff introduced, 2262, in which the makeup of the council, as we all know, will be changing. And we're hoping that change, we know that change is going to happen September 1st. So we're a couple of months out, but we also recognize that this will be our last in-person council meeting. So that's why we wanted to have Barry here and recognize people today. As you saw in your board packet, Alyssa has put together and staff the really, I guess it's sort of the structure of what the council is going to look like after September 1. And much of it is the same, as you know, from the committee structure that is outlined here. I think it's very important to recognize the makeup of the council with the 5 congressional districts being represented, and then 4 at large. And the 4 agency directors will be non-voting members of the council. And as we all know, the really critical addition to what our current council is the housing director, and Chelsea's presence here. Thank you. So I think that was one of the big takeaways from the whole implementation or strategic plan development, was how critical housing is for our kids to be ready for kindergarten. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Already finding ways that we can connect with DHS, which is another critical partner. So we're very excited about that, and having that cross-sector council, what we're doing as with the governor and Barry playing a critical role in looking at the post-September 1st council, is making sure it is a cross-sector council. So we actually have 9 sectors to represent, and Terry, or Bobby, I guess, pointed out that business had played a really critical role at the beginning, and certainly one of the 9 sectors is business, and making sure we have that voice back on the council. So I think we've learned a lot from the past 5 years plus. There's mention, as you notice, that the council will need to coordinate with the governor's children's cabinet. As has been mentioned before, that cabinet has just played a really critical role in having agency directors come together and identify places within their own plans and goals where early learning fits. So having the cabinet and the council work together will continue to be important. The standing committees will look really familiar. You know, it's going to be pretty much what we've had to date. An exciting piece of the standing committees is that we're going to have them co-chaired this year, or coming year. And for early care and education, Donna Schnitker has agreed to be a co-chair of that. Thank you very much, Donna. Equity implementation, Donalda will be a co-chair of that committee. And when I spoke with Kelly yesterday, she indicated that she would very much like to serve on that committee. So she will also be involved there. And then the home visiting committee will be co-chaired by Martha. And I'm excited that Terry will also be a member of that committee, because we know how important the public health perspective is in this whole home visiting, but also sort of healthcare alignment goes. So having current council members stay connected with through the committee system is critical for keeping the historical perspective but also just the expertise that these council members will bring. And as we look down the road at a workforce ad hoc committee of some sort, we know workforce is a critical piece of our implementation. Fortunately, Bobby has agreed to serve on that ad hoc committee when it gets launched, which is probably a little ways down the road. So thank you, council members, for being willing to stay very connected and spending time on implementation. This document was revised from the one and sort of the graphic we saw at our last council meeting to try to reflect some of the input that we heard, a piece of which was make sure the community voice continues to be represented on the council. And that will be partly through the hubs, that certainly will have a critical role in council, but also the standing committees. And we will be sure, I think your point, Terry, that the council needs to move around the state. It's been a budgetary issue in the past, and assuming that all goes well with the student success funding in the future, we should be able to definitely move around the state again. So thank you for bringing that up again. I think that's sort of the update. If there are questions or comments about this document in our agenda about the council role and structure, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we'll go to Alyssa to talk about a new coordinator role.
Yeah, so I try, I know there was a lot of feedback last month about making sure that this council didn't end up being just agency driven and driven by the needs of the agencies. And so hopefully you can kind of see through this proposal that that wasn't the intention, and we don't want it to function that way. And so we kind of scoped down and added some clearer contours with the Agency Implementation Coordinating Committee, which we previously called the Steering Committee. And I think your point was well taken that obviously agencies are a key implementer in this work, but they're not the only implementers in this work. So really just calling it out as focusing on the agency implementation, not Raise Up Oregon implementation at large. So that was really helpful feedback. We've already had sort of a touch point with almost everybody who will be serving on that from our agency partners, and we have a kickoff on July 8th. We've sent out some homework. We've already started asking them to take a look at that DOT activity you guys had done last fall to make sure that we were able to reflect clearly sort of that full circle lead role versus that half circle more supporting role, and get their reflections and bring that back, asking them to identify how legislation may impact sort of the priorities and the work that needs to happen, any grant activities and work that's kind of happening already to move the work forward. So we're really excited to get that launched. And again, really just focusing them on what needs to happen at the agency level, which would then go to the executive committee we've outlined here. And that executive committee will be staffed by the new council administrator. And we're sort of viewing them as meeting more frequently than the council, and to sort of be that reviewer. Bobby, you'd made the point earlier that because there was no division, the council ended up doing a lot of work that shouldn't have been at council. And we have kind of stumbled through that, and we're in a pretty clear space, but it can be easy to fall back into that. And so one of the roles of this executive committee will be kind of taking that lens of, is this policy work and policy direction we need from the council, or is this implementation agency focus that can be handled elsewhere? So that'll be a really key function. And this council administrator will be staffing that committee and really sort of helping track the work happening at the committee level across the board, so we don't kind of lose those threads. So those are sort of the high points I wanted to highlight based on sort of the feedback you'd shared last month. And then with the Rules Advisory Committee, Miriam's going to speak to that a little bit, but I just wanted to reiterate that you guys actually adopted the rules process in November of 2017, and it's still largely the same process. We will still be making sure, to the extent possible, that there is council representation, that we have parents and families sort of at the center of that, obviously providers and sort of relevant program staff. I think, again, as we kind of pull things away, the council won't be approving membership, again, as we become less frequent. But those guiding principles will still be upheld and that process will still be used. So those are the structure pieces we've figured out right now.
All right.
And
Yeah.
this isn't a structure question necessarily, but on the early learning hubs, I think from an agency perspective, we could have a more both leadership and systemic invite to our folks who are local and on the ground. Because I know in various times, if folks get an individual request, they then have to come to Central and they don't know
Right.
about it. So let's talk offline about
Yeah.
how to really make sure our district folks are ready for the ask from the hubs. And I think we can make a tighter connection, which might be true for the
Yeah, I
cabs
was
as
thinking
well.
about the community action agencies. I think it's probably a very similar
Yeah.
conversation.
That'd be hugely helpful. We've gotten that question from the hubs of if we go to, our DHS field office, will they know what this work is? Do they know what Raise Up Oregon is? So that would be wonderful to kind of start bringing that up and how we get that communication coordinated.
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. Great.
And that's, I think, really where that agency implementation coordination team becomes really, really critical. I think as we've been thinking about this, it's really also a transition for the Early Learning Council to not be working primarily with one state agency, but working with 5 to really kind of facilitate, I think, those kinds of communications.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Very
That's
critical. And I want to go back just for a minute. I neglected to mention that Measuring Success, which is obviously a really important committee for us, is going to be an ad hoc committee because hopefully it's almost done with its work. We think we're going to see this dashboard any moment now. So it will be an ad hoc committee in the future, and I'm excited to say that Bobby has agreed to be the chair of that committee, and Holly, who chaired it pre her maternity leave, has agreed to stay on that committee. So we will keep Holly's input, but Bobby, thank you for agreeing to sort of continue chairing because you really took that over when Holly left. So thank you. Thanks. And Miriam.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple updates around sort of early learning divisions work around Raise Up Oregon implementation. So one is we've been spending time really working around here internally. As you know, there's a number of strategies that the Early Learning Division is responsible for with respect to Raise Up Oregon. So planning out what that structure looks like internally. We're moving to having kind of a core team. A lot of this work is really driven by the Student Success Act and session and some of the responsibilities, either policy shifts or new budget investments. So we're going to have, we have 2 retreat dates planned to begin working on what is our operational plan for the division aligned to the responsibilities we have in Raise Up Oregon, putting work plans together that will also I think, help our different teams as we think about implementation, map out what will stakeholder engagement look like, what will be timelines for rules, and racks that will need to be established, what will staff be prioritizing. That's all, again, driving towards Student Success Act and Raise Up Oregon implementation. So 2 retreats as well as a core team that's going to be meeting weekly, that's going to be providing the leadership around implementation and implementing those work plans. David has done some really great work of taking Raise Up Oregon. This is a process that I think the Agency Implementation Committee is doing more broadly for all of the strategies. But for us, really looking at the outcomes of session, as they look right now and as we expect and anticipate. So what's the work that we will be asked to implement through as a result of session, Student Success Act? How does that align to Raise Up Oregon, and sort of what is other work or priorities that are happening right now? And so that's the baseline from which we're starting. It's, I'll say it's pretty significant. I think some of these retreat days will be prioritizing within priorities as we think about the next kind of 12 months, but really exciting, and I wanted the council to know that. The other thing I wanted to mention is Equity Fund. Again, this is a new program that we will be administering, and so there's been, I think, a real need to start earlier, to start even prior to session wrapping up in terms of some engagement with stakeholders. So Lillian has been facilitating a group of leaders in communities of color, of culturally specific organizations who are very involved in a lot of the advocacy around the Equity Fund to work with us to begin to, build out from the legislation some of the design of the program. So we are anticipating that a request for information is going to go out this summer, which will be really designed in a way to give us really important feedback from the field and from communities around a number of areas. I think both design of the Equity Fund as well as help us understand what kind of capacity and technical assistance will be needed and engagement to be able to support this effort. I think we anticipate, as we know, as we look now at just our current contracting with culturally specific organizations is pretty minimal. We know that it's been happening more through subcontracts, through hubs. So we think we need a lot of information about what kind of support we'll need to provide for communities to understand about this opportunity, and for some organizations to be contracting with the state for the first time directly. So I think that's going to be really interesting work. And again, I think hubs will be also very helpful as we in promoting the RFI and helping get the words out in their community. The other thing I will mention is that we will probably be looking to we will need to establish a RAC in the fall. So for the aspects of what we'll need to do to get grant making and contracts established, we'll need to have administrative rules. So I think our hope is having the RAC in the fall, again, following the process set by the council, as well as, the principles in terms of the voices that we hear in that RAC, just so that by the time the council is convening in January, we'll be in a position to be able to adopt rules. So wanted folks to know that, and I think we'll definitely be looking to EIC. And so Donalda's, we're setting up the EIC and the charter and everything. I think you and Khalid, we hope will be really play an important role as we bring that RAC together in the fall.
Just a comment on that. Multnomah County had put together a guidance document on contracting for culturally specific and culturally responsive services. That's really well done in terms of the legal pieces, procurement, reviewer guidance, scoring, et cetera. So I'll send you a link to that document.
So that would be great.
I know there's some.
Yes, I'll send it to you too.
There are
A
some
lot of work went into
guidelines
that.
that the governor's office has too, right? Already.
Executive order on business equity, I think.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking of?
Well, because I just remember from the public health modernization grants, well, even the hub grants, there were some specific things that, and even then people, I'm trying to remember, there were questions that were asked, and I think that some people thought that they weren't robust enough of questions, or they were too vague and didn't understand what they meant, or that they were too easy to, like, it was the full spectrum of questions, or it's just too easy to check the box, like,
Oh, sure.
yeah, sure, I coordinate with,
Right.
so I think, and I'm sure all those comments are on the record somewhere, so
That's a good point.
finding that balance of.
So that's all I have.
That's all you have?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I think then we are ready to wrap up this council meeting. Was there any other comments from anyone before we adjourn and eat
Can I just say, the last 8 years, it's been an honor to be able to help and serve Oregon's families.
Thank you, Terry. Well, I appreciate the foundation that you three founding members of this council put under this effort. We wouldn't be here, obviously, if you hadn't committed a whole lot of time and expertise to figuring out how do you put an early learning council and division together for the state of Oregon. So we will be building on that foundation for years to come. So thank you. Eva.
Yes, I would also say thank you. And I've learned so much, and appreciate the opportunities that, for even like personal development as well as like being able to do a lot for families and children and providers in this capacity. It's been great. I also feel like I should correct the record, and I don't know if I need a new plaque, but I wasn't part of the founding council. I was on the design team, and then I was part of the screening tools committee, but I wasn't a full member until 2012.
I consider that founding.
Oh, okay.
All right.
You got things started.
I was like, I wasn't on the original council, but I was like, I should correct the record.
You're on House Bill 4165 version.
Yeah. House Bill 20, there was two, was there 2009?
And it was Senate Bill 909.
909, that's it, yeah. Senate Bill 909, House Bill 4065.
Okay, well, thank you for the correction.
I just want to say thank you for welcoming me as an early learning system director. It's been an honor to work with all of you. I was thinking this morning about at our first retreat when you drew your ideal system and how actually well those mapped to the Student Success Act and a lot of the policy bills in session. I will forever consider this an honor to have been in this role and to have been able to serve with all of you, especially around Raise Up Oregon. I think it's not only a plan that will make a tremendous impact in our state for children and families, especially those who are underserved, but lately, in the last couple of months, I've been just getting feedback around how unique this plan is for our field as we think about conversations around early learning systems. So it's, I know I'll always carry that with me, and I hope you will too. So thank you.
Thank you. And Barry, thank you for being with us.
Delighted to
when
be
there are
here.
a few other things
Delighted to
going
be
on
here. No.
in your life.
This is a lot nicer place to be.
You're gonna hang out here for the rest of the day.
Barry?
New office space. And please convey to the governor once again how
Of
appreciative
course.
we are of her
Of
leadership.
course. Thanks to all of you, of course. Yeah.
All right. We're adjourned.
Lunch is served.
Time for lunch.